2 ogres approached the pen outside of camp. Though the litter was barely 2 weeks past, the Mornfang pups were already the size of men. "Did you bring them meats?" asked the elder, reaching a hand back to him without waiting for a reply. The young ogre handed him the gargant chunk, looking ahead to the starvation-crazed young Mornfang. "A Huskardson must know how to separate the wheat from the chaff," the elder said in passing. "The earlier the better, lest we waste food for nothing." He tore off a piece and put it in one hand, then made 2 fists and approached the first beast. Its damp snout snuffled at the hand with hidden food. "What do we do with this?" he asked. The young ogre thought. "It found the food, so it can find us food." "Wrong," the elder grunted, smashing his fist into the thing's skull, breaking the life from it in one cruel movement. "We find food easy. Food is ours. We feed them by choice, but it is our choice, not theirs." The next beast shied away from the violence in fear, and the elder looked to the young ogre. "He's right to fear you," he said. "Aye," frowned the elder, smashing its head in pity, "but cowards have no place here." The third Mornfang looked from ogres to crumpled animal shapes on the cold ground and approached, picking the empty hand tentatively. Another crash, the thing's tongue caught between its teeth as its head slammed into the ground. "Too stupid to even know which hand has meat," the elder laughed. The fourth and final Mornfang crouched low in the corner, a wild glint in its eyes. It sprang at him, past both fists, going straight for the old ogre's throat, claws and teeth bared. The Huskard caught it by the scruff, holding it aloft. "Very good," he said. "This one saw the lie of the game, sought to kill me and survive." "Is it smart or crazy?" asked the young ogre. "Who cares? Both work fine." The Huskard gently fed it and put a hand on its shoulder blades. "Make your brothers proud, spirit. Their offering shall give you strength." The ogres left, dragging 3 corpses back to the cooking fires, and the last Mornfang joined them. Welcome to the Ogre Mawtribes Faction Focus. So putting aside some of the artistic licenses of that intro, ogres in Age of Sigmar are not exactly smart. But the Gutbusters have a dangerous transactional low cunning, and the Beastclaw have a murderous predatory earth wisdom, of sorts. An ogre is 12 feet tall with a juiced-up powerlifter physique, and then surrounded in sumo blubber with tanned flesh as thick as tire rubber. They are cursed with insatiable hunger, whose magic blesses them with the ability to digest anything. A human knight's head, his skull and metal helmet in one bite, his horse and the barding, undead zombies, skeletons, even creatures of Nurgle. Beastclaw are double cursed, sharing the maw's hunger of their Gutbuster cousins, but also by the Everwinter, a huge elder winter spirit demon storm that follows them wherever they go. Beastclaw are masters of survival, however. While most would simply freeze to death or get horror movie picked off one by one from savage Wendigo and snow shades, they pulled a year locked in here with me now, and waded into the storm long enough to pound the Yetis into submission, enslaving them to be used as chaff, and rode out in front of the storm forever, using their curse as a weapon of war. Gigantic, monstrously corpulent over-tyrants rule the Gutbuster empires, physically rivaling great unclean ones in size, if it can even be imagined. Though they leave the fighting to their minions and generals. Their all-consuming war gluts are led by tyrants, and their cabals of slaughtermasters and butchers, with powerful meat magic and blood sorcery. Their savagery and power was so great that they actively thrived during the Age of Chaos, taking great joy in the sheer number and volume of chaos-worshipping food walking around, to the point that they left their cities and territories behind, ever greedy for fresh meat. Titanic frost kings rule the Beastclaw tribes from atop Ice Peak mountain horns. Mysterious and rarely seen, some say hibernating. They let their Frostlords lead their own Alphrastuns on hunts and conquests as they see fit. These all-mounted ogres are perhaps the most living force of nature Age of Sigmar faction, for they follow the winds and prey through the mortal realms, killing everyone, eating everything, their crops and animals, their Stonehorns even eat buildings, roads, and bridges, and the Everwinter rolls through and kills the land into a 300-year glacier. Cycle of life. It's beautiful, really. Part 2, Models. Ogres are an excellent army to learn painting on, and it's one of the reasons I chose them for my first army years ago. Lots of material types to learn, Skin, fur, leather, cloth, metal, bones, horns, it's got it all. Plus they're reasonably elite, so you can make them look extra nice as a bunch of little centerpieces. Many balk at so much exposed flesh to paint, but look, you're going to have to tackle that stuff eventually. And you might as well do it on larger models that are of a comparatively messy race. Also faces and tattoos. The Tyrant. These are big boss ogres that are equipped like a medieval Punisher. 2 ogre pistols, a monster slayer glaive, a mortal wounding thunder mace, a bite, and a big name, generally for extra armor, though I like Brawler Guts better for the extra wound bonuses on the charge. Problem: none of his weapons have a proper number of attacks and the pistols always miss. Solution: you take him for his amazing command ability. And as far as combat goes, who cares? Sometimes he gets lucky and pounds people, but you got what you wanted on turn 1. His command ability, Bully in the First Degree, picks a unit and he breaks one of their jaws for D3 mortal wounds, and that unit never has to take a battle shock test for the rest of the game, even if he dies. Doing this twice for 2 units on turn 1 and then running him around doing whatever he wants is common. Then you have your 2 gut mages, It's so sad that these didn't get updated models. I see you, Seraphon. Downside, these look hyper dumb. Upside, all the ogre parts fit together relatively easily and kit bashing in this army is great. Also, there's lots of third-party ogres floating around. It's a shame we have to do this, but what are you gonna do? Most of the stuff looks great. It's really just these guys. Anyway, as far as wizards go, they kind of suck. No bonuses to cast, their War Scroll spells are both bad, although the Slaughtermaster's is worse. But that's okay because you want them for their meaty lore spells, we'll get to it later. The main difference between these two is the Butcher is a foot wizard who can actually fight, and the Slaughtermaster has a slot machine on his back that 33% chance gives you a +1 to hit for free on a target unit. Which one is better? Slaughtermaster no question, but late game when all the troops are dead on both sides, a foot wizard who can fight the enemy foot wizard and just dumpster him in combat is nice to have. There's also a Firebelly Wizard, though no one else shares his keyword in the book and it feels like an idea that wasn't followed through on. There aren't any artifacts and traits he can use, his War Scroll spell sucks, but he looks great as a model, and the Firebelly lore spells are actually sweet. Playable as the cheapest wizard if he's sticking by the Maw Pot in my opinion, but second fiddle to the other 2 because you really want 2 of those lore spells. Now we get to the big damage, big body troops that you would expect in an ogre army, in Iron Guts. 4 wounds, 4 up armor, 8-inch move when hungry, 2-inch reach for 2 ranks of fighting, rend and 3 damage weapons, hitting on 3s. 4 for 220, but more likely 8 for 440. So elite that they end up fragile, and every ability on their War Scroll is terrible, but you have got to respect the damage. Something like 24 damage after 4 up armor with 0 buffs, somewhere in the 50s with full juice. These guys are here to welcome you to Pound Town. Just make sure you hit first, they're expensive. Like most armies, Mawtribes has Chaff, except this is ogres, so your Chaff is huge. Ogre Gluttons come in 3 for 120 or 12 for 400 with a stellar 80-point discount. Their armor sucks at a 5 up, but it's 48 wounds of beef. Reroll charges for free, 3 attacks a model on 3s and 3s for 2 damage with exploding hits. This Chaff can fight. They don't have rend and can't fight in 2 ranks, but they excel at blasting opponent massive regiments that aren't anvils. You have plenty of options in ogres for fighting high armor. That's what Iron Guts, Ribcracker, and Stonehorns are for. And impact hits. And don't underestimate the power of free charge rerolls. If you want Chaff for your Chaff, you can take Noblars, which are little grot-like creatures that have quite possibly the worst War Scroll in the game. Now Chaff isn't supposed to be stars of the show or anything, but it's nice when it has even one remotely relevant ability, which these do not. No damage, no defense, and worse, slow enough to hamper your own movement for your dudes behind them as well. Actually, now that I think about it, a lot of the Chaff in the game, like Clan Rats, Skinks, Gloomspite, Stabbers, they're pretty good in combat, aren't they? Anyway, play these if you're protecting a mostly stationary Death Star of some sort, else play Guttons. Probably not both. Where they really shine is in units of 60 that are Battle Shock immune because a Tyrant punched them, as some gigantic punching bag with 6 up armor that is really just a DPS check for your opponent. How much damage can they do against guys who don't do anything and don't do anything to stop it? They'll hold a position for a reasonable amount of time unless your opponent is playing like really good hammers. For me though, I chose Mawtribes exactly so I did not have to play 100 tiny idiots. If you want goblins, play Giets. They at least have nets and mushroom steroids. You also have alternative Gluttons in Lead Belchers. Now I wouldn't call them shooting because if you evaluate them as a ranged unit they are extremely horrible. And they have 2 attacks instead of 3 in melee combat, but they do have rend. And if you cheat a little bit when you're looking at them and add their shooting profile to their melee profile, they only do a little less damage than Gluttons against 4 armor. On opponent turns, when you can't shoot, it's well below glutton damage, obviously, even against 3-up armor, and they don't have that 80-point discount at 12, and they don't reroll charges. But if you're going to take only 6 gluttons for some reason, 6 Leadbelchers is a fine side grade. I know, dear listener, I wish they were expensive walking artillery that shot real cannons too, but we get the rules we get, sadly. Maybe next book. Then you have some old stuff with very questionable sculpts. From the Gorgers, who can deep strike but cost literally double what they should. Same with Man-Eaters, who are like sometimes faster Iron Guts, only worse in every way. And the Scrap Launcher, which is like the Iron Blaster, except it looks dumb and doesn't do any damage. Speaking of the Iron Blaster, this thing is like the Seraphon book in a way. On its own, he's got one shot that will miss, and then you move on with your turn wondering why you spent points on it. But, like Seraphon, if you spend all these extra rules and resources making it good, running 3 of them in Undergut sub-faction so they can all shoot twice, and a Tyrant that took a battalion to take a second artifact for the trophy rack to give them +1 to hit against heroes and monsters, and then maybe some Chaff to protect them. After that 600 plus points before the Chaff cost, they can really blast. It's just probably too many points and drops. However, they will do their job. Good luck rolling those d6 damage dice. On the Beastclaw side, we have the mighty Frostlord on Stonehorn. Big armor at 3-up with a 5-up stone skeleton ward, reasonably fast at 12-inch base, 14 when hungry, not bad. It's nothing crazy, doesn't fly, no run and charge or anything. 14 on a monster is respectable. 4 Frostbeer attacks on 3s and 3s rend 1 damage 3, good start. 6 big boy 4 damage Stonehorn attacks on the charge, plus a random number of random damage value hoof attacks that are always disappointing, which is what happens when you stack random with random. His Bellowing Voice command ability rerolls charges in an AoE around him. This guy slaps. Play him in Beastclaw, play him in Gutbusters as your one fast unit. There's also a Frostlord on Thundertusk version, which is pretty slow at 8 inches for a monster, and the mount does truly pathetic melee damage. But you do have a Frost Breath to sprinkle some mortal wounds on larger units at 18 inches. It doesn't have Stone Skeleton, but it's at -1 to get hit in melee, which is substantially worse, but it is something. He's definitely weaker than a Frostlord on Stonehorn, but fully suited up with Mount Trait and Artifact, he can be kind of useful as a supplement if you already have some Stonehorns. It's okay, he's utility and variety. Taking a step down from Frostlord to Huskard of each mount is Huskard on Stonehorn. Somewhat maligned because he has the audacity not to be a Frostlord and doesn't have the Frost Spear. And he's required for the battalion instead of the Frostlord, which is a crime repeated from the original book. But I'm here to say that he is underrated. Worse save at a 4-up, but he gains a Vulture ranged attack. And that is what he gains, always choose the Vulture. It's the only reasonably reliable ranged attack. He only does a little less damage than the Frostlord version, since most of it comes from the mount. And his special Linebreaker ability turns your Mournfang into Rhino Chads with 16 3-damage tusks on the charge in a unit of 4. Tricky to set up, not the greatest on their own, but like with Iron Guts, you gotta respect the damage. Huskard on Thundertusk also trades in the good armor and Frost Spear, but for some minor prayers, instead of damage. +1 to wound is a nice prayer. D3 healing is not, any way you slice it, and your lore prayers are mostly garbage. His melee damage is approaching 0, but he does have that nice buff and shoots some mortal wounds at large units, just like the Frostlord on Thundertusk. Like that version, you probably only play him if you already have some Stonehorns. Again, he's okay as the utility supplement to a bunch of other stuff. Rounding out the Beastclaw heroes is the Icebrow Hunter. He's kind of like Tyrant with a bunch of different equipments, except all of the Hunter's gear sucks. 2 different one-shot ranged weapons that will miss, bad melee weapon, unreliable 4-up breath attack that you have to give up attacking with your ranged weapons for, bad armor. On the surface, he seems downright awful. And he is. He is just awful. But you can deep strike with him and bring along 1 unit of Frost Saber Chaff, which gets +1 attacks from his command ability. Can you pump enough juice into them to make them do good damage? Yes, once. And then you're out of resources and they all have 6-up saves, so it's probably not worth doing. However, he unlocks Frost Saber Battle Line for the cheapest Force Organization chart requirement satisfaction in the game at only 240 points, for Hero +3 Battle Line. Most people play with a battalion that does this inherently, but it's a nice option. Also, don't underestimate the power of putting dudes right where they need to go, even if all of them suck. For the final variants of the monsters, we have the Battle Line versions. Stonehorn Beast Riders are like the Huskard except without Linebreaker or Mount traits. Just some unreliable but decent melee attacks, Stone Skeleton, and decent move. Every other combat they whiff almost entirely, but the damage potential is alright, and they make good battle line, with capturing bonuses. Thundertusk Beast Riders are like the Huskard except without prayers, and so we've finally gotten to the point where maybe they don't really give you anything. The lukewarm Frost Breath was arguable because the Frost Spear and good armor, or prayers and mount traits, but with none of that, I don't know that they do enough. However, they are pretty cheap, so you could play like 7 of them in an army if you wanted to absolutely meme. I wouldn't tell you you're wrong, I basically do that with Stonehorn. Warnfan Cavalry make up your normal battle line and are essentially gluttons with Iron Gut armor riding half of a Stonehorn. 9-inch move, 11 when hungry, 6 wounds each, 4 up armor, 4 tusk attacks per mount on 4s and 3s, rend 1 damage 2, on the charge, damage 3 with Linebreaker, and your choice of 2 mediocre weapon options for the riders. One looks big with 3 damage hits, but actually kinda sucks since it's only 2 attacks that hit on 4s, and the other one looks less impressive with no rend and 2 damage, but more attacks and they hit on 3s. They're both so close statistically, even against various armors and with various buffs, that it's honestly personal preference. Except the rendless prey hackers come with an Iron Fist to kick back mortal wounds on 6s to save, and you roll all your saves at once, so they're the clear optimal choice. With the riders doing so little of the overall model's damage, picking up the utility of Iron Fist is kind of a no-brainer over Gargant hackers. Unless you just want big weapons, in which case, again, I can't tell you you're wrong. Their bases are huge and unwieldy, so units larger than 4 are generally not recommended unless you're very confident you won't get edge tagged by some clever opponent, thus rendering them useless for the whole game. Like everything in Beastclaw, if they didn't get all their charge bonuses, they are very disappointing. Then there's some other stuff. You have Chaff and Frost Sabers. 40 points for 2 normal-sized cavalry bases, 6 up armor, and some 4s and 3s attacks, for 1 damage, but they have rend at least, and nice fast movement at 9 inches, so they don't slow down the dudes behind them too much, or at all in Gutbusters. And plus 3 to charges if near a hunter. They're expensive for Chaff, as it's 120 points for a decently sized line in front of stuff, and forget about full bubble wrap. But they're an option, and pretty nice to deploy on objectives turn 1 to score stuff, and then run around to generally take up space, be a nuisance, or a speed bump, which is a noble endeavor. Then there's Icefall Yetis, the enslaved former horrors of the Everwinter. And, GW please, and it's Finecast too. Disgusting. Anyway, these guys have humongous bases and only 1-inch reach, which really hurts them. Not being ogres so they don't get any allegiance abilities hurts them even further. Hitting on 4s and only having a tiny amount of attacks for 50mm bases is probably the nail in the coffin, and then 6 up armor is another nail in the coffin. However, they're at -1 to get hit in melee, but that doesn't save them, and they have a very tricky 6-inch pile-in that they can also activate from 6 inches away as well, which is the quite powerful saving grace. Hard to use them well and lacking greatly in reliable damage or durability, but they can be quite strong with clever play. Waiting to pile in until the opponent's activated already killing something else, always retreating and piling in to sort of move around blobs while still fighting every phase, there's some cool stuff you can do with them. Part 3 Playstyle. Mawtribes is reasonably split between 2 factions with some possibilities of mixing. Gutbusters and Beastclaw Raiders. Mixed is generally 90% Gutbusters with 1 Frostlord. Gutbusters are buff casino Babe Ruth Butterbean. Faster than you think they should be for their size, but don't have great staying power. Sometimes they strike out, but when they hit it is a home run. And they pull the slot machine 4 times a turn, lucky 7s are the jackpot. All these other Age of Sigmar armies have bags of tricks, teleporting, cheating at fate dice, summoning nonsense, get out of jail free cards, anvil hordes, run and charge, flying, reliable spells, on and on. Who needs it? Actually, Gutbusters really needed it, but look, everyone slaps, even your wizards and chaff, even your artillery has impact hits. And that kind of stuff adds up. No funny business, fair and square, bash people's brains in and take their stuff. And eat them. Maybe eat their stuff. Beastclaw Raiders are Monster Truck Rally Avalanche Mad Max. If there ever was a poster child army for winning or losing the hardest based on the priority roll, it might be Beastclaw. Drive around the battlefield with minimum 3, maximum 6 living monster trucks and a few squads of woolly rhinoceros wolf riders. Play a strong objective game because might makes right, trample people into dust on the charge, or if you don't get the charge then flail uselessly and die. So consider getting the charge. This is Ogre Glengarry Glenross, ABC, always be charging. For allegiance abilities we have might makes right. Ogres count as 2 models for capturing, which brings Gutbusters up to normal, from painfully elite, and monsters count as 10, which brings Beastclaw up to competitive army, from the bottom of a landfill. Then there's Trampling Charge, which gives your ogres impact hits. Whatever natural number you rolled to charge doesn't include bonuses. You roll that many dice and each 6 is a mortal wound. Seems bad, and it is, but if there's 8 or more ogres or the unit is a monster, for each 4-up it's a mortal wound. Now we're talking. This means that for list building, units smaller than 8 are suffering extra weaknesses and should be considered very carefully before going through with not having 8. The exception is Mournfang, since they can still be good due to Linebreaker, as their base size is way too huge for 8-man units to not get in their own way or get tagged. Then there's Grasp of the Everwinter, which has you roll a die per enemy unit in combat with a Beastclaw model in your hero phase. They take D3 mortal wounds if you roll equal to or less than the current battle round. So 1 battle round 1, 2 battle round 2, etc. This rarely does much, but it can sometimes help free you from a tar pit late game if you aren't already dead once it rolls back around to your hero phase. Finally, there's Ravenous Brutes. An ogre is either eating or hungry, in other words, in combat or not. If they're eating, they have +2 bravery, if they're hungry, they have +2 move. +2 bravery, who cares? +2 move, that's the good stuff. Then you get to pick a tribe, although you don't have to like some armies do. But tribeless isn't very good, so basically, yeah, you do have to. There's 6 of them, so we'll do this quick. Meet FistMa tribe, the most powerful tribe in the lore with the worst rules by far, of course. It has, and I'm not exaggerating, 0 redeeming qualities, all 4 rules are bad. It's supposed to be about gluttons. Even that is done better by Bloodgullet, avoid at all costs. Undergut's Mawtribe, it's actually good. You take it so your 3 or 4 Iron Blasters get to shoot twice, because literally doubling their damage is what it takes to make them playable. You're all in on the blaster plan, but it does what it's supposed to. Winterbite Mawtribe, this one is supposed to be about Frost Sabers and Yetis, but they're not very good. And so people actually take it so that their whole army is -1 to get shot on their side of the table and mostly ignore those units in a mixed force. I heard shooting is coming back to the meta, so this is becoming a more and more common choice, even though it's only for that one ability. And a magical weapon that sometimes increases in size every turn. Thunderbellys Mod, this one is supposed to be for Mournfang, but the bonus movement rule cancels itself out at best, and the command ability buff requires you to jump through so many janky hoops just to get the damn thing to work right that playing Mournfang in some other tribe is not only way stronger, it's also more fun. Bloodgullet Mod, aha, here's the fun one. Your Butchers and Slaughtermasters know an extra lore spell and can cast 2 spells per turn. Nice, twice the lotto tickets. Though you still only have 2 buffs worth trying, so maybe a bit sad. The command ability lets gluttons reroll wounds, not bad at all, and the trait gives you an extra 3 inches to pile in with around your general, which is great for these big base dudes. And the Splatter Cleaver artifact is quality flavor plus useful effect. If it does any damage, there's an explosion of blood, healing all ogres within 12 of the hero. Hilarious and actually decent. This is probably the most common choice for Gutbusters who aren't trying to shoot big cannons, and who aren't afraid of their opponent's big cannons and going Winterbite. Boulderhead Mawtribe is the fun one for Beastclaw. Your monsters get a bonus wound, although they still chart the same. And all the heroes can take a mount trait, instead of 1+1 per battalion. Your command ability, Dig Deep Your Heels, can be used in any phase and lets the monster act as if it's on the top row of its damage table. Be it combat, movement, whatever. Very strong since Beastclaw monsters charge quickly and painfully. And the artifact gives your mount attacks +1 to hit, which is big since they're normally on 4s. Unlike Gutbusters, there is very little diversity here. Boulderhead is just always the choice for Beastclaw. Although it's no surprise. Monsters are fun, it makes monsters better, the other 2 don't do anything, what do you want? For your generic artifacts and traits, there are 45 of them, and 1 is kind of strong but only in a specific list, Trophy Rack. And then 4 are fun but not great, so pretty cool for casual games, like Tyrant getting impact hits as if he were a monster and Sky Titan scatter pistols. Onto the fun stuff, spell lores. Besides the Slaughtermaster's Slot Machine Cauldron, this is where the gambling is. All the good ones cast on 7s. Blood Feast gives +1 attacks to a non-monster ogre unit, and Rib Cracker gives -1 saves to an enemy, both within 18. They aren't insane like Slaves to Darkness or Skaven buffs, but they're solid, especially on an army with damage 2 or 3 weapons. There's also your standard target enemy is a -1 to hit debuff, and a +1 damage to monster mount spell. For Firebellies, there's a 4-up Horde Breaker, which is definitely the target number you like to see, and a -1 to hit aura that would be the default choice if it didn't cast on an 8. And Tongues of Flame, which does D3 mortal wounds to target unit with 5 or more guys, every time they move until your next hero phase, which includes move, charge, pile in, etc. Firebelly's lores are fun. Then there's Everwinter Prayers. Keening Gale is a 4-up for +3 move, which is not as reliable as you would like, but +3 move is good. The other 2 are so bad. They're so bad. Anyway, mount traits are a final option for Beastclaw heroes. Unlike Flesh Eater Courts, you cannot pick the same one twice. Black Clatterhorn gives your good attack +1 to hit, very nice. And Metal Cruncher does d6 mortal wounds at the start of combat against war machines and enemies with 2, 3, or 4 up armor. This is sick. Works in both combats. Now, a great many units in the game, even extremely durable ones, technically have a 5-up save characteristic, at least to start, before bonuses, including the most durable unit in the entire game, Hearthguard Berserkers. But who cares, you gotta bet big to win big. That's probably the Ogre motto. Thunder Tusks get one that reduce incoming Rend by 1, not bad, and combos well with Plate of Perfect Protection from Shaman. You also have a terrain feature, the Great Maw Pot. Your wizards are at +1 to cast while they're standing within 1 inch of it, which is awesome. But you do have to follow your squads around when you play the game, so this is more of a turn 1 only bonus. Once a game you get a giant radius AoE heal for D3 if a hero is nearby to use it, which isn't bad. Unless you're Beastclaw, then it is bad since you can't babysit a terrain feature with a 400 point monster, and you don't have any wizards. Hey, it is what it is. As for Battalions, Urolbad gives you mortal wounds on 6s to hit, very fun, and Yorlbad gives you a first turn D6 move, also not bad. Both are fun and strong. They are nearly the only way to fly when it comes to a Beastclaw army. They simply give you everything you want, all in the same battalion, and lowering your drops is critically important in an army like this. Gutbusters fare worse as far as battalions go, with Gourmand giving you 2 pulls on a Slaughtermaster slot machine, which is actually perfect, but the unit requirements are a little scuffed. Only 1 hero, only 1 unit of Iron Guts, have to play Lead Belchers. It has some issues, but it's still alright. Tyrant's Gut Guard is useful as well, though again you can't quite put what you want in there, and the ability that lets Iron Guts take wounds for the Tyrant is thematic, but backwards for what you would actually want on the table. Iron Guts are simply more important than the Tyrant is after he uses his command ability. Critically, there's no battalion for an Iron Blasters list. If there were, it might be the strongest way to play Ogres. But it isn't, so your list building is a little problematic. Torbad is appropriately named, and Junk Mob is also appropriately named. Skull doesn't really do anything, but it does give you an artifact and a command point. Part 4 Stats. Gutbusters. Offense only B+, which might surprise you. If they had any sort of reliable way to land their buffs and put those units where they need to go, this would be S tier, because Iron Guts have truly ridiculous numbers when juiced up. However, they're just sauntering forward and hoping to get the charge. No easy mode, flowchart, I win buttons from teleports or ranged damage here. You gotta fair and square people down. Plus, their wizards are kind of awful, failing as many casts as they attempt, even without enemy counterspells to worry about. You also have a strong cannon shooting option, but you give up a lot of points and drops to do so. And D6 damage is still unreliable even after all that work. However, don't underestimate the ability to explode someone's heroes and monsters right away. And everyone has impact hits for mortal wounds, there's some rend in there, and should you win the lottery, your dudes will golf club swing just about anything off the table. Defense C. Simply average and nothing special. 5-up armor on Gluttons is poor, but resistant to Hordebreaker spells due to being elite, and often just as immune to battle shock as Oziark Bone Reapers. People say they're wound dense, and that is true, but 30 Phoenix Guard are 420, so it seems like more trivia than a good point. An Anvil they are not. They're big chaff that can throw down in a fight. Iron Guts have better armor, but are so elite they can't afford to get hit with anything and risk dropping below that critical 8 model threshold. Your cheapest chaff in Nobblers don't have any rules, slow you down, and often add enough extra drops and points to about break even, or end up low on threats. But chewing through 60 guys, even ones with 6-up armor, can still sometimes take a while. Positioning C+, maybe B-. All your dudes are move 8, that's good. You have nothing else to do, that's bad. Your 1 Deep Strike is 1 small unit of chaff only, so rarely taken, but the 1 Frostlord is a nice monster and reasonably fast. Mechanics D. Your opponent just has very little to play around here. They get to flowchart autopilot the match for the most part. Your guys count as 2, and that is good. Your Gluttons are good campers, and your guys have impact hits, so they need to be careful about not getting charged. And they definitely need the chaff up. Your spells are all 50/50s and easily disrupted, but quite punishing when they land. It's also quite punishing if they haven't chaffed up. But sometimes you take cannons and you can snipe guys and kill their monsters, that's strong. This is a gambler's army, for better or worse. You gotta bet big to win big. Beastclaw. Damage, also B+. They do considerably less damage than Gutbusters under ideal situations, but they are much better able to get themselves into those situations. Their small footprint allows for double or triple impact hits on the same enemy unit, which can often charge phase take out MSU Chaff units to pile into the real stuff behind. Lots of mortal wounds in Ren 2. When they have not charged, their damage is surely somewhere in the C range, perhaps worse, but at least their unreliability is more under your control than just praying a bunch of obese gut wizards roll hot every hero phase on their spells. Defense C-, a little worse than Gutbusters. Stonehorns look really durable. The Frostlords have a 3-up save, and that's great. 5-up ward, that's great. But the rest of your monsters are on 4-ups, and that's a lot of points over and over for only 13 wounds a pop. Most people spending 400 points on hammers are getting 30 to 40 wounds out of the deal, often on 4-up saves. Zooming out a bit and looking at the army as a whole, you just don't have a terribly large amount of actual wounds. And staying power becomes a problem in a game as deadly as AOS. You are very often running entirely out of units by the bottom of 3 or top of 4, especially if you're not winning those priority rolls. Playing with 10 big models is hilarious until 2 of them die on turn 2, and now you're playing a 1k army. Positioning A-. Your guys are all 11 or 14-inch move, which is highly excellent. Beastclaw has probably the highest positioning grade in the game attainable by an army with 0 shenanigans at all except for pure speed. Plus the heroes can spend a command point to unchart their movement, and you can reasonably attack multiple fronts at once, at least until turn 3 when half your guys are dead. Mechanics B. Might makes a lot more right in Beastclaw. In Gutbusters it mostly just puts them on par with what other armies are paying to capture for similar guys. In Beastclaw, straight 10s on fast monsters who only need 1 millimeter of their base on an objective for highway robbery, especially in 2s and especially after impact hits. Considering you can unchart a monster during movement or retreats means the opponent really is going to have to be thinking about this unless they want to get got at the bottom around 4 or 5 like half my opponent's lifetime after this book dropped. Impact hits are also much stronger in Beastclaw due to the smaller surface area of your guys, allowing multi-charges or freeing a stuck friend so that he may then charge. Thundertusks are something your opponent might really worry about if he hasn't read the new book, and Everwinter is nothing. Part 5, Notes and Target Audience. Beastclaw is basically the perfect Venn diagram for what most people want when they're entering into a war game, it seems. Which is a concern since I want to stay special, but what can you do? Everyone wants to be elite because they don't want to paint a lot of guys, everyone wants to charge and use monsters, everyone wants to pick it up on the cheap, and 3 start collecting boxes is literally 2,000 points exactly. You use every model from the boxes, and the list is actually pretty good. You don't even need to buy the Maw pot since it's just straight up not designed for Beastclaw. I didn't even play one when I went 4-1. Ogres of all sorts are great for kit bashers, customizers, and new hobbyists alike. Most of the limbs and heads are relatively interchangeable, you get tons of bits in every kit, and as I mentioned before, you get to work on all the material types. A downside is spamming more than 2 Stonehorn will look awkward when copy-pasted next to each other because they have the same pose. So if you're trying to meme like me and run 5 or 6 of them, you might have to do some reposing work. On the table, you might find yourself generally low on options and paths to victory, both as Gutbusters or Beastclaw or mixed. People say the army is easy to play because it doesn't have a lot of mechanics, but in my years of playing many armies to make videos about, I have overwhelmingly found the opposite to be true. It's simply harder to win without powerful tricks and get out of jail free cards from tons of powerful mechanics, spells, and abilities. Your mistakes are very punishing when you can't just resurrect that entire slain unit for a command point, or freely teleport wherever when you misjudged positioning, or spend 3 command points on a whim because you started with 4 and you get them back on a 5-up, or summon more guys every turn, and so on. But Mawtribes is an army for masters of the fundamentals. No golden parachutes when you run your business into the ground. You gotta hold that and learn from it, so that next time anyone getting run into the ground is your enemies. Cordially welcome your opponent to the meat dimension, pull those slot machines, rev up your monster trucks, and remember your ABCs. Always be charging. Audible footnote: if you don't care for the aesthetics, but like the Gutbuster playstyle of big men throwing their weight around, consider Blightcyst Nurgle, Kurnoth Sylvaneth, the new White Dwarf Trogoths, or Fyreslayers philosophically even though they're short. If you like the Beastclaw playstyle of crashing monster trucks into stuff, but don't care for the aesthetics, honestly there aren't many pure Monster Mash armies that are terribly good. But if you go with big cavalry instead, you get a similar playstyle in Gore-Grunta Warclans, or a much more competitive one in Ideneth Eels. Demi-Griff Knights, Hammerhall, and Cities of Sigmar. Honestly, a lot of armies have reasonable-ish cavalry lists. If you like being huge while retreating onto objectives, but mostly want to stay out of fights, preferring to instead just stand around to score points, consider Sons of Behemoth. Special thanks to my patrons for keeping me alive. I stream Mondays at 6 p.m. Central on Twitch. Stop by, ask any questions you want, and chat AOS. And thanks for watching.